Hello, beautiful artists. Today it's September, and I thought I would paint one of the September flowers. It's either Morning Glory or the Asters, and I love daisies, so I thought I'm going to paint some little daisies. And then if it fits, I kind of sketched in this little hummingbird. We have a ton of hummingbirds right now, and I thought that might be fine. So what I did is I just used a bowl and drew a circle, kind of sketched a circle with a pencil, and I placed my asters here just to give me some guidelines in how I'm going to face them. And by the way, this is 140-pound cold pressed paper. You know, I love, love, love my Artisto pads. That's a whole weird thing. They're calling them Artistic Eye, but I will supply the link because when I use the link below that I'll put in the description, I did get these pads. So I'm not sure what's going on there. And this is my fall book. So I've got a couple brushes here. I've got my 8 round, which I love because it's pretty snappy. And I like the snappiness because I can control my brush strokes a little bit better. And then I love, as you know, if you've been following me, the Velvet Touch by Princeton. They're also snappy. This is their number 4, but they've just got such a great feel with the handle. So I might use that for some of the little details, and I think that's good. So I am using my laying palette by Paul Rubens. Let's just get that sprayed here. Love this palette. It's got all my favorite colors. And then I've got my 2 containers of water, one to wash, one to rinse, really important. And I love the white ceramics. So those are made by Meeden. And again, I'll put all my links I've used to purchase mine down below for you. And this is a really pretty textury paper, so I think that's going to be fun. I'm going to use wet in wet for the little birdie, and then wet on dry, a little bit wet on wet for the little asters. Okay, how I'm going to start, I think what I'll do is in the middle, let me just spin around my palette here. I've got this giant palette I've been using lately. I really like it. It's specifically for my desk. Let me see if I can scooch over a bit so you can see it. It is specifically for my desk because it's quite large, quite heavy, but it's just got a ton of mixing room. And I can have all my Paul Rubens colors. I used the tubes for these. So I've also been putting in my pans into there. So either or, I kind of switch back and forth. And I think for the centers, I will use, let's see, let's get some of our cad yellow here. Such a pretty color, but really vibrant, so be careful. You want it to be a bit saturated. I'm gonna use this just so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've got about 50-50. It moves pretty well. We can always go darker with watercolors. And then I'm just going to start with this small 4 brush, creating some of the centers. And it's also going to show me some of the directions. So light pressure using the tip of my brush and holding at just a bit of an angle. And I'll just start tapping in some of the yellow for those centers. I'm just going to do a few of them because I don't want to do too many and it'll dry. The other thing I think I'll do is this is the cad orange, also in your palette, so right here. And I'm using these maybe just a little bit thicker. And I'll dot in and let it blend a little bit with the yellow that I already put in there. There we go. And then I'm going to start that beautiful purple color. I already had some purple in here. So let's just get that wet. Oh, so pretty. I love the purples in the My Laying palette. And I'm going to use a lot of 2 brush strokes. So the brush stroke I'll be using is kind of a point press, and I'll do a left and a right side. So let's start right here. Let me move that out of the way for just a bit. Actually, let's start all the way on the left. So I've got that about 50-50 again, 50 pigment, tap, 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 get that extra water off. And I'm just gonna start creating these petals. Point press, point press, point press. I'm just gonna repeat that through the whole thing. Point press, tap, 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 point press. Aren't those pretty with the orange? I just love that color combination. Tap, tap, tap. And then I'm going to go in there and just, I love that spread too, by the way. See, it's spreading a bit with the orange. Might drop in a little bit here and there. Then maybe there's just some little ones there. Let's start with this one. Point press, point press, point press. Just keep doing that same stroke. Tap, tap, tap. And this one here. Maybe just a few right there. Point press. Tap, tap, tap. And you can overlap them here. That's perfectly fine. Left and right. I filled some in. I left some kind of open. And maybe just tap in here and there. I don't want to cover up how that orange is blending because I think that's so pretty. Just like that. There we go. And I'm just going to move on to the next ones I've got there. We could go in there and add in a few leaves because it could be pretty to blend with the purple a bit. So let's grab some of our, let me move some things out of the way. By the way, isn't that a lovely card? Anne sent me that for my birthday. So pretty, Anne. I still have that on my desk. I'm going to move a few things so I can turn my palette here. I love this palette, but it is quite large. And then I'll grab some of that sap green, or I think in the My Lang palette, it's actually referred to as tree green. About 50-50 again. And let's just create some leaves here. Point press, widen that belly. Point press, point press. Just a few here and there, like that. And there we go. I'm going to keep that pretty simple, but look at how pretty. And actually, before this completely dries, you always can go in there with a little bit more of that purple. Ooh, that was a bit more than I planned. And just let it spread around. Just for some interest. This one's a little bit drier, so it's not going to spread as much. And isn't that fun? Like just letting the watercolors kind of do their thing there. And there we go. We're ready to go on to the second one. So I'll be grabbing a little bit more of my yellow. Tap, tap, tap. And let's start again. So we just start by painting in those centers. Maybe we can do this one too. Oop, tap, tap, tap. There we go. So easy. And we might as well do this one too. There we go. Now I'm going to go in with that little bit of orange, just for some interest, and tap that in. A little bit more right here. And then that purple. And you know, definitely going in with a little lighter value because like this, we can always add it in. You can lift. And then let's do point press. Start with those leaves again, point press. Now, normally I might do some guidelines just to keep me straight, point press. Just make sure the tip of your petal is pointing towards the center of your flower. And asters, to be very honest, asters are, from looking at pictures and stuff, they are a little bit more of the bluish purple. I'm making mine quite a red violet type of color. And you know, I see you guys taking liberty, kind of creative, your own unique creativity, and taking my tutorials and making them in your own colors. And I just love that. Point press, point press, point press. There we go. Like that. And we can always add in more petals if we want. But I quite like that. Isn't that pretty? How about if we add just a little bit of the bluish purple and see what that does? So I just added in some ultramarine blue to my purple, and we can tap in some of that. Just lightly here and there. And look how pretty. So we're gonna start over here, point press, point press, point press. And you know, I'm always doing my best to just find that recognizable features of the flowers. So they don't have to be perfect, but just something recognizable about that flower. And then I'll add just a tiny bit more purple. So there is harmony between them. So going in with that purple. Because if this is too blue, then we'd want to add some blue over here so that there's harmony between the entire piece of art. There we go. Ah, so pretty, isn't that? I never really paid much attention to Aster, so it was really fun recently when I came across them and was like, oh, that's a pretty flower. Point press. Just keep going. And again, feel free to overlap these. There's nothing wrong with that. So there you go. And maybe just a few sticking up right here, like you're looking at the edge of that. And now we'll go in with some of those green leaves. I'm just kind of tucking them in here and there. Oh, so pretty, you guys. Look at that. I always think of cards when I do these things because I just think these would make such a pretty card. Now I am going to use my 8 round for, and you can use the Princeton Velvet Touch 8 round too. I always share my link for that down below. This was the 4, which was perfect. And now we can use the 8. So I'm going to go into my little bird here, and I'm hoping this looks like a hummingbird because I have had tons of hummingbirds lately. I'm going to go into my pink, of course. You know I love my pink. And just with a wet brush, there we go. And then maybe a little bit of the blue or purple down below that. And as you can see here, I'm going wet and wet, and I'm just kind of loosely adding that in. Maybe a little bit of reddish brown on his belly down here, but very wet and wet, so they almost all kind of blend together. Something like that. I want it to be very loose. And then, of course, that bright emerald green, which I believe is this one. Yep, there it is. Love that color. Now, that's going to kind of stand out because we're not going to really have that color anywhere else. So I want to go a bit light with that because I don't want it to drag our eye there and stop. And then maybe just a little bit on his back end. And I think that's plenty. I'm rinsing my brush, tapping it off, and just going in there and making sure that all blends. Let's go in with a little darker brown here. So I've got my Van Dyke brown here, my favorite brown, and I'm just going to go in, tap in, and because this is damp, it's going to blend, and then maybe a little bit up here, like that. Yeah, I like that. And maybe, how about we even do his tail here? These little guys are so fun to watch. I love it. So there we go. I could add, how about if we add just a touch of yellowish or an orangish just to kind of blend in some of that orange down here. So I'll tap in a little bit of that. There we go. So we've got our little bird. Now for the beak, I'm going to grab my 4 again, and we'll just color or paint that in. How about we use this? I think this is my Payne's gray in here. Might be Prussian blue. And there we go. Oh, I love it. Might just tap in even a little bit more of that. Yeah, I like that. A little bit on the back wings here. And if that is too stark or too hard of lines, I can always go in with a brush and either lift, or I can soften those lines like that. And there we go. I think I'm just gonna leave him as is because I think he looks really pretty right now. Of course, right when I'm saying that, I grab a little bit of that red to add in. I just love with watercolors how everything kind of mixes and mingles. And I almost feel like, see, I said I was gonna leave it and here I go. I want a little bit more of that green on his head because that's so pretty. And then wash and rinse my brush real good, tap it off so it's like a thirsty brush, and tap it off again. And there we go. Now, if I want that edge to be a little softer, I can always go in there with some water. You can always, if you want some really cool effects, just dab in water and it will blend lines, but at the same time, always also give this fun look. Now, once that dries, what I'll do is go in and I will do his eye. And I feel like I want to darken that little beak up. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the tiniest bit of black, maybe mixed with some purple, and go in very, very light touch. and create his little beak. And that's the reason why it's so important to be really mindful and careful of the point on your brushes, because we don't want to ruin that beautiful little tip. And that way we can keep getting those tiny little lines. So I think that's quite nice. Now let me play a second here. And just tap in a tiny bit. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, he's dark enough. Now it'll lighten up once, you know, it'll lighten up once it dries. Let's see here. Should we do some little leaves? Get more of that tree green. And just add in some leaves like that. I think that's kind of nice to kind of highlight the bird. And we're about done. We could do a tiny little bud, maybe a tiny little bud here. So let's do some green. And then the tiniest bit of purple. There we go. Just to give it a little something there. That's all. Okay, isn't this fun? I think that is dry enough. I'm going to be really careful, because if I put in the dot for his eye right now and it touches anything wet, it's gonna go crazy. So let me make sure here. I'm going to draw, and you could do this with a pen too, because I know sometimes getting those little tiny lines can be a little challenging. All right, there we go. I think I am about complete here. I really like that. I think that was a fun little painting. And again, I'm always saying this, if you know, you are good at like calligraphy, oh my gosh, you could write some beautiful little messages on there. What I'm doing right now is just adding a few little details, but you know what? You don't even have to do that. You can just leave it like it is. I think it's really pretty. So this, what I'm doing now is not really necessary, but it's easy to put in a few little details. Isn't that nice? All right, well, happy painting, everybody. Maybe I'll make a kit out of this. They're $2.50. I appreciate your donation, and I give you a drawing with the swatch colors that I use, the image of the original so you can follow along, and then I try to give you the key points that we used in this to go with the tutorial. So I maybe do that for you, and they're only $2.50, but they're a big help for me with my supplies and things. And I will see you all soon. Hop on over to Patreon. There is a free membership there. You can join us all. So many supportive people there, and we're having so much fun. There are special private tutorials there too, where we go a little deeper. And the biggest thing, you can share your work there, because we can't do that here on YouTube. So I will see you all soon. I'll just be right here telling you, you are an artist. And I'm just so grateful to have this community here we've created. It makes me so happy to wake up in the morning and see your messages. And I will see you soon. Happy painting.